You've eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit, but your feast is nearly over.
This is not my home. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon. Why aren't you laughing?
From this moment on, none of you are safe.
Welcome to the Batman Book Club, a podcast exploring the Dark Knight Library. I'm your host, Ryan Lauer. The Batman Book Club is a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network, hosted by Batman on Film. Just go to batmanonfilm.com, click on podcasts, and you'll find the Batman Podcast Network that has a whole list of other Bat-related shows that also like to dive into other nerdy subjects that we all frolic about in our free time. Now, the Batman Book Club is also on Patreon, so if you like what's going on with the show, you want to help support the show, keep the generators running in the Wayne Manor study, just go to patreon.com/thebatmanbc. Now, thank you for listening to episode number 129, Dark Detective. Joining me is a voice that you've heard on this show before, and actually he's growing on this, or he's been added to this growing list of people I've had on since March that I get to say, this is the first time I've spoken to them since meeting them in person. It is the one and only Mr. Encyclopedia, Jay Yaws. Jay, welcome back to the Batman Book Club.
Thank you once again for having me, Ryan. And
Yes,
it was great meeting you in person. I felt kind of weird because I saw you at the Batman premiere and I was like, who is this guy? I know who he is. I know I'm supposed to know who he is. But then you said Ryan Lauer. And I was like, oh, yeah. Okay.
You saw me chugging Mountain Dew and I was going, hey, the Batman Book Club. You're like, oh, there's that annoying guy. Got it. No. You showed up and you saved the day and you brought an action figure to Peter Vera.
I did.
He was on cloud nine.
Yes.
Boudin sausage in his pockets, action figure in his hands. It was a weekend. What a weekend for that guy.
Yes. I'm glad to help him with his the Batman toy collecting. Sorry, action figure collecting.
Action figure. Come on, Jay. Figures. A seasoned veteran of yourself. You know better. Yes, you and I actually, you were Jay Yaws Saved Christmas last year. We did the Christmas episode of the Batman Book Club last year, and we actually kind of laid out the next couple of books that you wanted to do. And then before we know it, it is November, and you're like, this is your triumphant return. So apologies it's taken so long, but it won't be as long to get you back on. As we continue the list, on the list.
It's a good problem for you to have, and at least I've got dibs on some prime choice grade A Batman content.
Yes, including the one we're going to talk about. But yeah, I definitely look forward to what is going to come up in 2023 when you return. So I don't actually want to waste any more time because I'm actually really excited to dive into the book of choice today. So if you're ready to just rock and roll, Jay, which I know that's what you do, you rock and roll.
I rock and roll all night long. Sweet Susie.
All right, well then let's go ahead and let's dive into Dark Detective.
Now the future state one, is what we were discussing.
Thank you.
Right
yes.
Before.
Clarification.
Fun little anecdote for the listeners. Right before Ryan sent me the invite for the recording and everything, I had a very brief, very fleeting, very temporary, but very real fear.
Very real.
That Ryan thought that the Dark Detective I was referring to was Batman, Dark Detective, Future State, whatever, hyphen, backslash, whatever. Which was a fine story, but was not the Dark Detective I wanted to discuss. So I'm very glad that did not come to pass.
Yes, if you read Future State Dark Detective, pause.
Yes.
And track down, or wait, don't pause yet, because I'll tell you where you can find this story, and then pause and read it and come back and listen to us. So Dark Detective, this version was written in 2005, or created in 2005, released written by Steve Englehart, with art from Marshall Rogers and Terry Austin. It was released a 6-issue series was also collected and released in a trade paperback. It's actually not available on DC Universe Infinite.
I know, which was kind of surprising.
Crazy. Or Hoopla. It's not available on Comixology. So digitally, it's kind of like, However, this story was collected in the Tales of the Batman Steve Englehart book, as well as the Legends of the Dark Knight Marshall Rogers collection, which are
available digitally. Yes,
both are available digitally. Both, I don't know that they're Steve Englehart's might still be available in physical copy. Marshall Rogers, if you want to spend a pretty penny,
highly doubt. Yes,
and then both of those collections are on my favorite app of all time, Hoopla. So, Jay Yaws, I'd like to ask you, which version do you read for this episode?
I read the Rogers collection on Comixology.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think that's the one I read.
Okay.
Pretty sure. But for reference, I have the physical trade paperback.
Yes. Well, it's actually kind of funny because almost samesies for me.
Oh, no.
Except I have the physical version.
Ooh.
This is for you, Justin
nice.
Kowalski.
Oh yeah,
those are the pages.
Hear them floppies.
Hear them floppies. Yes,
Hear them floppies.
I have the Marshall Rogers hardcover. I have the Steve Englehart, but that's tucked away. Marshall Rogers one is what I have out. But like Jay, also I do have the trade paperback, but it's tucked away. This Marshall, I pulled out all of my. I got a new bookshelf, a bat shelf this year, and I pulled out a lot of my Legends of the Dark Knight and Tales of the Batman collections and put them out for display because it looks so pretty. And the Marshall Rogers one was, just to look at,
just so all the guests can see them.
Yeah, I mean, it actually is kind of true. Mira's nephews, when they do come over, they run right over to the bat shelf and look at what I have on there and see if I have anything new. So I'm kind of like,
good kids.
Yes, good kids. How about? Do you remember the first time that you read this story?
I remember reading it at one point. I don't remember exactly when it was. Backtrack a little bit. While I was reading this the other day, catching up and refreshing and everything, and doing a little bit of research, this was published bi-monthly. I think it was from like something like June to August or August to November or something. So 2 issues came out each month for the duration of the 6 issues, which I thought was kind of cool.
I didn't know that. They were way ahead of the Rebirth era.
Oh yeah,
way twice monthly. Good for them.
I mean, apparently with Strange Apparitions, which I mean we'll get into it, but this is pretty much a sequel to. Steve Englehart had apparently written every issue of that run before anyone penciled it.
Yeah.
So he likes to work ahead, I guess. And so that definitely comes into play here.
Worked for him. Worked out pretty well for him.
I mean, he only put one of the most definitive stamps on the Dark Knight, so it's not like whatever. But my first time reading it had to have been like 6 or 7 years ago. I don't remember if I read it before or after Strange Apparitions. I want to say after, because that would only make the story make sense, really. But I also don't know if I would have known about the story without having read Strange Apparitions first. So I remember reading it, and honestly, until I reread it the other day, very few things stuck with me from my initial reading.
Excellent.
I mean, honestly, I'm not gonna lie. For a little bit here, I was not necessarily dreading covering this, but I was more thinking of it as like an obligation. Like, okay, I've done Strange Apparitions. I want to end with another story that we won't spoil yet. We'll let you guys find that out later. It's not the Widening Gyre, because A, that's already been covered.
Yeah.
And B, I've never read it, so I'm not gonna cover that one.
Okay.
So it's like I know the first one and the last one kind of got to cover Dark Detective in the middle, so it was almost like an obligation.
That's interesting. I want to dive into that here in just a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, since my initial read, I remember that the Joker's in it, because there's some very, very memorable Joker stuff. I remember about Bruce and Silver St. Cloud, and I remember the house at the end and everything, and some of the things that go on there. There was a lot of pulling out the trade paperback and seeing Scarecrow and Two-Face on the cover, I had no recollection they were even in this story, which is crazy because they're both kind of big parts of the story. But
wow.
Yeah.
So I'd have to say, so yes, Jay just mentioned that this story is, I mean, it is flat out, it's a sequel to Strange Apparitions. Same team of Englehart, Rogers, and Austin. And Jay actually, who was on before, and it was episode 54 in May of 2021. Jay and I talked Strange Apparitions. So if you didn't listen to that one, I would recommend going back, and because we definitely dove into Strange Apparitions, because
we covered Strange
because
Apparitions,
it is one that I think that we mutually really hail as a great collection of issues.
All-timer.
It's actually a top 10 story of mine. But yeah, so I say all that also because when I didn't go back and listen to what I said, but I do remember the comic shops that I did buy the Strange Apparitions trade at. Actually, not long after I bought that, because I remember buying it and I was with my uncle and he said, Strange Apparitions, like, oh, you have to get this. You got to read it. This is great stuff.
Good uncle.
I was just getting like money and comic shops. And this was probably, this had to be 2006, 2007. And so I did buy it and I read it fast and I loved it. And then it's like when he was visiting again, so it had it probably maybe like 2007. When we went through and he said like this Dark Detective, he's like, that's the sequel to Strange Apparitions. So I was like, oh my God, like I gotta buy it. Yes. So it would have been the 2007-ish era that I ended up buying Dark Detective in trade and then read it immediately after I bought it. So you kind of answered this, but I got always ask, like, why Dark Detective?
Because it's a sequel to Strange Apparitions, and it bridges that in another story.
Done.
But we'll go into it more after reading it. It's even though I forgot a lot of what goes on in the story, it's a worthwhile Batman story. It's entertaining. It's
all right.
It's a good one.
Awesome way to transition into this. So rewind about 2.5 minutes ago, where Jay said it almost felt like this was an obligation. So was this was only like your second time reading it then, or it's just you haven't read it much, so it was just very foggy?
No, it was my second time reading it.
Okay. So an obligation because you didn't remember, or do you remember that you didn't enjoy it that much?
Because I didn't remember a lot of it.
Okay.
And a lot of that may have been, from the high of Strange Apparitions and then reading this and just being like, oh, okay. That's all right. And even thinking a little bit like more broad than that, this was a planned second part of a trilogy that Englehart and Rogers planned, but Rogers sadly passed away a couple of years after this was
he completed issue 1. So actually
I didn't even realize they got that far. Wow.
100 things Batman fans should know and do before they die. Joseph McCabe. I highly recommend that you track this book down and read it, because he has tons of interviews with the greats. He Tim Sale, RIP. I think I saw in here Neil Adams, and Kevin Conroy, every aspect, Denny O'Neil, and then one of these in an interview with Frank Miller, but definitely interview with Steve Englehart is a chapter in this, as well as the Strange Apparitions run. And actually, and that's something that was mentioned in here that Englehart says of they had a part 3. He completed all the scripts, and Rogers had finished, and it was going to be Rogers and Austin again.
Mm-hmm.
And Rogers, he finished issue 1 and then died unexpectedly of a heart attack. So I do understand, like, nope, close the book, done. I'm just intrigued of like the scripts. I would really like to read the scripts and just see what
do. Even these days, with sadly so many creators passing, doing tribute issues to it, it's get some greats and have someone get like a Doc Shaner or a Jorge Jimenez or like a Jorge Molina, just to alternate on issues and release the complete, if it was complete, the pencils were complete enough to release the issue, release the first issue, and then get some all-star talent penciling the rest of the remaining 5 issues, and then just release that. It's not about making money, but you know what I mean. That would make money. We would buy that.
Absolutely.
To complete the story they want to tell, and as a tribute to this, sadly lost, but not forgotten and still revered talent.
Yep. Absolutely. And I do respect the decision of he doesn't go into any details in that interview either. He just said, he completed scripts for Dark Detective 2. And he says, and Marshall completed the first issue and then passed away of a heart attack. And that was it. Didn't comment anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just, bottom line, I'd be interested in where it would go, but also we'll get into where the story kind of goes anyway.
There's definitely a lot here that was here to lead into a third story. Definitely.
So after this, let's come right out the gate with it. How did you end up feeling after revisiting?
It's still not, the highs of a Strange Apparitions for me, but it was a lot. It was a very quick read. It does start off a little slow, but once I got into it, I burned through it in an hour, and there was a lot more depth to it than I remembered, and honestly, it's a lot funnier than I remembered too. I found myself chuckling, if not outright laughing, at a few moments throughout. So I wasn't necessarily dreading it. Obligation may not have been the right word. It wasn't like if you or I had proposed, I have somewhat quote unquote jokingly said that Batman Odyssey needs to be covered. Ooh. Just because it needs to be covered, because it's
you can have a lot of fun with the
that would be a blast. But it's not like I hated it like that, or even like an all-star Batman and Robin that's this is not good.
Oh man, that would be an awesome conversation.
So, but it was almost like one of those things. It's okay. It's from what I was remembering before I reread it, it was okay, it's going to be a fine story, but I don't know if it's just going to be kind of a, almost like a placeholder just to get us to the next one. So I wasn't sure how our conversation was going to go, because again, I haven't revisited it since I originally read it. But yeah, in rereading it, it's still a worthwhile story. I don't think that anyone is necessarily going to read it and think it's better than Strange Apparitions. There are parts of it that I still don't necessarily like the choices that were made, but it's still a good, enjoyable story that, it's great seeing that all-star, top 10 all-time team reuniting, sadly, one last time to come together for a Batman story.
Yeah, I think with you, so this one's usually pretty fresh. Sometimes I don't remember specifics. So as you said, I never forget Joker's in this, never forget Scarecrow's in this, never forget the Two-Faces in this. I never forget that Silver returns, and that she 2 times the Mr. Gregory.
Yes.
But then sometimes I'm like, but wait, what's Scarecrow's motivation? What's Two-Face's motivation? I kind of forget. Joker's is plain and clear because it's the cover to issue 1. It's you could say maybe, I don't know that you'd say iconic, the legendary. The cover, vote for me or I'll kill you.
Yes.
Joker. You've seen that image. I know you have if you're listening to this.
Is an amazing cover.
It really is.
That's really, if you want to catch everyone's attention and get them to read your book, put the Joker huge
threatening
face on a cover, pointing at you, almost mocking Uncle Sam and saying, vote for me or I'll kill you.
And that's what he's running on. And there's points in which I appreciate Englehart's the sense of humor, because he in the original Strange Apparitions run, I guess retroactively it was called Strange Apparitions run,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it was The Laughing Fish, which you're all also familiar with, at least because of Batman the Animated Series. But that is one of the greatest. I mean, it's a two-part story of that and Sign of the Joker, of one of the greatest Joker stories I think ever told. Just I really think that it is.
I don't
But
think anyone would argue with you. And if
okay,
they
thank
do,
goodness.
then they haven't read either one of them.
Then they
you
haven't
can
read
go
them.
it. Yeah, exactly.
But I think Englehart, like, great voice for Joker. He has like kind of his own taste and take with the Joker. And I think the point of what Joker uses with this is like, look at this. I'm running on vote for me or I'll kill you. And it's working.
Yeah.
And I think that is actually hilarious. And by me thinking that's hilarious, it's like, well, then that's a joke. And the Joker loves jokes that are ironic. And look at that. Like that. And that ends up becoming, that's the through line of this whole thing. Now, I think that vibe wise, this does fit a little bit of the vibe of the Strange Apparitions run. I almost feel like a little bit of the, you could almost say it's a slight little layer of cheese in Strange Apparitions. Doesn't translate as well in 2005 as it did mid 70s. Right. So, you know, some of it does maybe feel like a little hokey here and there for me, but it's like also easily digestible. It's like, it's okay. It's fine. That's fine.
I accidentally hit mute. Whoops.
No.
I mean, it's almost one of those things that's like, you know, if I had read this in 2005, I might have rolled my eyes at some of the cornier, like Bronze Age aspects of it. But, you know, we're not, I mean, it's still not the same amount of time, but, you know, we're about 2 decades removed from this.
Yeah.
And that was, you know, 3 decades removed from Strange Apparitions, which is insane, crazy to think about. But even then, you know, 17 years later, you know, a story like this that has some of those kind of throwback vibes almost has like that nostalgic feel to it anyway. So you know, like you said, it goes down, you know, a lot easier and a lot smoother, just because with modern sensibilities, sometimes you just look at it and you're like, you know, kind of wish when they wrote comic books like this. So it might not have worked as well in 2005, but for me, it definitely works in 2022.
Yeah, we're in such a place now that we have, and as Batman is, he is the word that it's kind of like he's been connected to the word malleable now, but he is perhaps the most malleable of every kind of tone you can have with Batman. The extreme mature, like I just think Azarello Bermejo is like pretty extreme mature, and then you have the fluff light Scooby-Doo Batman mysteries,
Batman Scooby-Doo mysteries
Batman
that you
and
need to read, Pete Vera.
I know he's waiting for Scrappy, and I'm not waiting for Scrappy, but
I'm just waiting for him to read it because
one of these days it is. But and so the taste of reading this now too is that like, oh, it's semi-serious fun. But then as lighthearted, but then it's like, spoiler alert, but then Evan Gregory's arm and leg get chopped off at the end, and it's kind of like that almost like, whoa. That almost feels a little,
it goes some places.
Like that almost feels like it doesn't fit with the overall vibe of the book.
Yeah, that is one of the things in the story that I don't like very much, just because that part felt just mean. I'm already pretty squeamish, like, you know, in movies or whatever, when people
not like as much lose, as Garrett, I bet.
Yeah, well, I mean, when people lose, who is like a finger or an arm or a hand or a leg or something, I don't know. I just find that incredibly mean spirited, and it just gives me the willies anytime that happens, just because it's like, man, that's like one of those things that there's really no coming back from. So so seeing something like that in the story, you know, made me think, golly, even though, you know, Batman says, you know, hopefully in time to reattach them, and, you know, he has a long road ahead of him with therapy and everything, you know, hopeful that he could recover. It's still just like, come on, that's a bit much, because I don't think we've even talked about who Evan Gregory is. He's running for governor. And, obviously, since the Joker is now running for governor, he does not want Evan Gregory to run for governor anymore. So he does what he can to try to scare him out of it and everything. And Evan and Silver St. Cloud from Strange Apparitions are an item.
Mhm.
And so Silver comes back into Bruce's life, and she seems very happy with Evan and everything. But it's
Or does
almost
she?
yeah, it almost seems like Evan is like a means to an end in the story, because the fact that at one point, and we're jumping all over the place here.
Yeah, why not?
But the fact that Bruce and Silver hook up again, behind his back, and she 2 times him. That was one of the things that I remembered that made me not like the two of them in this story very much.
That didn't like Silver and Bruce, or Silver and Evan?
Silver and Bruce.
Yeah. Okay.
Just because I mean, infidelity and everything,
Yeah.
I mean, any decent person should not be a fan of that and everything. And I mean, the circumstances leading to it on the reread, the context made it a little bit better. Well, not better, a little less frustrating, I guess, as a reader. But I mean, I just felt bad for Evan like the entire time, because he doesn't have a lot of personality beyond, he's this guy that, is running for governor, supports Batman, and, is not like against him at all, wants to clean up the streets. Bruce likes him and wants to, donate to his campaign and everything. And then, he gets cheated on, he gets dumped, and then, he gets, lacerated at the end. So, he's actually part of my favorite panel in the story, which, won't spoil now, so we'll get to. But
ironically enough, it's when his limbs get chopped off. That's weird.
But no, I mean, it's almost like I wish that there was more to him in the story, so that there was more weight to it, especially because one of the things I like about Silver is that she chose to leave Bruce. She figured out who he was. She came to the decision that it was best for her and him that they not see each other anymore. So in Strange Apparitions, she like had this agency to her the entire time. And it's not like she doesn't hear, but I mean, in a sense, neither she nor Bruce did, because what drives them back together is being influenced by Scarecrow's fear gas. So it's just something that, like I said, the fact that it happened in the story at all, I didn't like. How it got there makes some sense in the story, but I'm still not crazy about it. And I don't think Englehart was trying to be mean-spirited toward Evan Gregory, but it's still, he's kind of I mean, he's definitely the third wheel and kind of a punching bag the entire time. So I wish there was more to the character to aside from all that.
You haven't read The Widening Gyre, you said?
I have not.
Did you listen to the episode?
I did.
Okay. Yes, just covered it back in August with Ryan Powers.
I listened to all the episodes.
Oh, bless you, Yaws.
Because I listened to the Batman Book Club.
You don't want to lose your membership.
I don't. Well, I mean, I don't just listen to. It's like with Holy Batcast. I listen to every episode of that because I listen to that show. I don't just listen to the, like to specific episodes. I listen to every episode because
bless your heart.
I am a devoted listener.
You are. Bless you. So yes, The Winding Gyre, Kevin Smith decided to continue a little bit onto this whole storyline. And man, you think Evan Gregory, well, you said that this is something you don't come back from. How right you are.
Yes.
Right at the beginning, you learned, hey, Silver's here. Hey, Evan died. So Bruce, we could be together. Like, that's really how it comes across. It's just like, holy hell. Like, oh man, this poor tragic character of Evan Gregory.
Yeah.
But I mean, you hit on a lot of points. And I don't think that it was mean-spirited intentionally. However, this, and Englehart even mentions, I mean, in that 100 Batman fans interview, that, I mean, Strange Apparitions, I can't remember. I should have gone back and listened to our discussion, but I think we brought it up of how he wrote a draft for Batman 89. And at the last second, it's like, instead of, Boss Thorne, it became Boss Grissom. Instead of Silver, it became Vicky. And he really feels like that was,
have to pay
yeah,
him, yeah.
that was his, his point. And he was a little, seemed a little bitter about it, but maybe rightfully so. I don't know. I'm not here to point fingers. Well, he also made a comment in this too, that he feels like for this Dark Detective, I don't know if he was implying, Dark Detective 2 as well, to be involved, or to be elements of those stories to also be taken for the Nolan trilogy. Of course, I could get defensive right away, because I'm like, don't you dare on that Nolan trilogy. But you look at Evan Gregory and that love triangle and tell me that doesn't seem very hard, like Aaron Eckhart, Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight. One, the looks. I mean, he's a blonde-haired guys. And then also to be with Bruce's like lost love. Like there is something that's there, and it's a politically, he's the, Bruce supports Evan. Bruce supported Harvey Dent. He's like, this is the person that can with Gotham. Of course, it's like different things, but I can see the connection. I can see some similarities.
I can see it when it's pointed out. Yeah. At no point while I was reading this did I think, man, this is a lot like The Dark Knight. Other
No,
than,
not at all.
the normal thoughts of, man, The Dark Knight is such a great movie that we all get, throughout the day, every single day.
It might just be the best movie ever made. But anyways, carry on.
But no, I mean, I can see that, when you point it out and everything. I think it's circumstantial, I'm sure, because a love triangle between characters, Harvey Dent already a political character in that he's the DA. The broad strokes, they fit, but no, I don't think so. Now, if they had introduced two completely brand new characters that match the physical descriptions of of Evan Gregory and Silver St. Cloud, and then gave them different names and everything, but then hit beat for beat this story, okay, then I might think it's a little fishy. But I doubt Christopher Nolan intentionally swiped anything from this.
Yeah. Now, because I had this book in my hand, and it got me to read Strange Apparitions again. I'm like, it's right here. It's in the same book. So I went ahead and reread it. Yeah. I reread that part, and it does. So Dark Detective does connect very well to Strange Apparitions. I don't really think it misses much of a beat. The art, hey, anybody's art is going to change and adapt after 30 years. So it definitely has a lot of like, it does seem very similar. It also does seem a little different. And it's like comics in the 70s and double O's.
Yeah, a lot of that might have just been, modern coloring techniques.
Exactly.
Things like that, different inking styles, different paper quality even, that's definitely gonna, and I mean, like you said, it's 30 years between the two, but you can still see, I'm just flipping through right now, like there's a scene where the Joker jumps down an elevator shaft, and Batman jumps after him and lands right on the elevator car that's like 5 feet down. I mean, that looks like Englehart's work from the 70s, just with a modern coloring update almost. So it's not at all out of place, no. And even with the characters, I mean, one thing that I do enjoy about the writing and the narrative of it is, like, to your point, it 100% feels like it's supposed to carry on from Strange Apparitions. And the character relationships don't just immediately go into a will they, won't they with Bruce and Silver. She, firmly, Bruce doesn't necessarily seek it, and she doesn't either. So there is kind of that mutual understanding and awkwardness of, okay, we didn't think we'd ever be in each other's lives again, but here we are. But we're also adults. You're with this guy. I like this guy and want to help his campaign. So let's be adults about this. So,
and it does become kind of, and yeah, so I can jump along with that. Listen to us. We're talking like soap opera, but I mean, it does fit because it's not forced, and it is like you said too, if it's not will they, won't they, because I mean that first issue ends, you don't think that it, there's almost like very minor like clashing of the two, and like we don't, and then it is in the moment of weakness of, so Bruce, and this is great because I never remember this, of how Scarecrow gets his fear toxin on Bruce. And even if you go back and look, so I mean, it happens in the opening incident. And when you, let's see, so I don't know what page it would be in issue 1. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, on page 4. After Batman jumps off the roof and there's a cop that's like leaning over, you do get an outline of the Scarecrow, like Scarecrow's shadow on that police officer's back. Totally missed it on this read through yet again. And then it's later on, I think when Bruce like says, oh, that first police officer, he put it on my cape. So then I went back and looked and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at that.
Oh man, I totally missed that too. And
mind blowing, right?
There it is.
I don't know if I ever discovered it. It's like I just kept reading. I never went back. And this time I did. I went back and looked and I'm like, well, look at that. Because I was trying to figure out, wait, which police officer, which cop? And I mean, you see there's a Scarecrow. So but back to Silver and Bruce. So it's during a moment of weakness when their guards are like completely down that Bruce is having this fear attack in the Batcave. And then Silver has like the same thing. And then both of them scared out of their minds, basically that's when they both end up reuniting.
Yeah.
And falling in love.
Again.
So, I mean, it all fits just like kind of like you said. And I think that does totally work for the story and in bringing them back together, because I don't think I agree with you, and it doesn't make me root for them, but I'm not like out to root against either. It's almost just feeling pity for Evan Gregory.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean,
that's all it ends up being.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't destroy the book for me or anything like that. Like that's the card that you remove that makes the entire house of cards fall or anything. And like I said, on a reread, it at least made more sense because, like I said, I completely forgot that Scarecrow was in this. Mm-hmm. I don't know how or why, but so forgetting he was even in it, of course, I forget that his influence is what kind of drove them back together to begin with. But I mean, it does, within the context of the story, does at least make a little more. It feels more organic than just, we're seeing each other again, that, the flame of romance is lit once more. So, forget your boyfriend, let's go make out instead. So
I do like the making out on the Batcave floor, all that guano. But Scarecrow's, I do. So part of how this does feel like a good, contemporary follow-up to Strange Apparitions is the inclusion of Scarecrow and Two-Face. You take the Strange Apparitions. Okay, so Hugo Strange is like the first 2 issues of that collection, right? And then he does kind of linger throughout. Penguin pops up in 1 issue.
He is the Strange Apparition.
He is the yes, but I'm trying. Penguin, I guess technically, is in like 2 issues, front and center in 1 issue. Deadshot's just in 1 issue. But it fits too, and it does, it does impact parts of the whole story. Yeah. So Scarecrow here, he does impact. So what's the big motivation of like, is he going to release and kill, Gothamites everywhere? It's kind of like, no, it's a little typical Scarecrow wants to scare Batman and take down Batman. And it's like, sometimes that's okay. That it's just that simple. And that's what his inclusion basically feels like here. Yeah. And I do actually really appreciate that. He's just a fine supporting actor with a really, like, his impact does impact, Bruce and Silver. And then it's a cool scene of taking him down later on in a great setting of a barn on a cornfield at night, like, and he's throwing freaking pumpkins. Like,
and what I love is that you're using multiple Batman villains. Mm-hmm. They aren't in cahoots and working together. Yeah. And yet Batman's still running across them just because, that's what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. That's what's going to happen in Gotham is he's gonna, even though the Joker is kind of the focal point of the overarching story, you've got a bit of an arc going on with Two-Face, and then you've got Scarecrow, just like you said, just showing up to mess with Batman for his own means and motives and everything, which is just one of those things, kind of like when Bruce interacts like just with normal people in the daytime as Bruce Wayne, when there's a good supporting cast of non-villainous or non-superhero characters that he can interact with, that just makes the world feel so much bigger. It's kind of the same thing here, when it's not just, okay, this is the Scarecrow issue, this is the Two-Face issue, this is the Dr. Double X issue, who does appear in this story, yes, and then this is the Joker issue to kind of bookend everything. The fact that it's all going on, even though this is a much more serialized story than Strange Apparitions was, which was very episodic with kind of an overarching serial, or not serial, but an overarching plot that
say
tied
serial
everything together.
Cereal, and now you're talking my language.
Yeah.
Cereal.
But I mean, it had an overarching story that everything kind of tied together to fulfill, but you could still read pretty much every issue on its own. This one, you've got to read 1 through 6 in order to get the full context of everything, but there are enough things going on in each issue to make them worthwhile as kind of a standalone issue on their own, which I really appreciate. I mean, with Scarecrow there, he shows up again, and then he's taken care of, and a bunch of other stuff happens in between.
Yep. And so you did mention Two-Face has almost a similar kind of inclusion, but also a little bit more, and it's also a little more bananas.
Yes, it was so weird.
Because I mean, the story opens up. It's really interesting, their cover choice. I think it's the cover to issue. Let me see before. The cover of the trade is, I think, the cover to issue 5.
In fact, no, it's not a cover of any of the issues. It's actually, I think, a composite image.
It's a new one, yeah.
Because that issue,
that's right.
That shot of Batman jumping down is from like one of the panels in like issue, like one of the latter issues, like issue 5 or 6. And then Scarecrow and Two-Face, I didn't pick out where those were from, but it's not a cover that's specific to any of the issues.
That's right.
Okay, yeah, there it is. It's I mean, in the trade, it's page 105 is where they got that image of Batman, and he's just jumping down from like a fire escape on the side of a building, while he's going around town trying to rough thugs up to find out where Joker lives.
Gotcha.
Because interesting. That's what surprised me too, because when I came across that page, I was like, wait a minute. And then
it's just interesting that's what they go with for the cover of the trade collection, when it's like, oh, but Two-Face and Scarecrow are subplots.
Yeah.
It's
like you'd think they would have used like an altered cover to issue 1 with the striking image of the Joker, saying vote for me or I'll kill you. And then, maybe put Batman on there. So you'd think they would have done something like that.
Can you check at the front of your trade, since I don't have mine on me, the year? Because I wonder if it's 2007, if it was after Rogers had passed, to where he couldn't do a new cover.
Nope.
Unless 2006. Okay.
2006.
Then, I don't know. Interesting. So okay. So anyways, basically bringing that point up, but hey, learned me something there.
I didn't have to use my Google and thumbs. Or
You didn't. You haven't had to Google once yet, hopefully. But it's so the book opens. So the story, the first page of the story is Two-Face flipping his coin. It's Two-Face. You don't see his face, but you see his hand, and it's a coin flipping. Hello.
He's got a gimmick.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not very subtle. And in the end, and then it's like he shows up and tells Joker not to run for mayor because still have like honor and respect.
That's my thing.
Yeah, for the position. And that's it. And that's kind of like, huh. And then you already said Dr. Double Death or whatever his name is.
Double X
made what we've come to find out 2 clones of Harvey, an all good person and an all bad person. And then that's kind of it with it.
Yeah, I mean that's clearly kind of one of those things. Yeah, that's clearly one of those things that they set up for Dark Detective 2,
right?
Because once I got across the this good clone of Harvey is killed like almost immediately.
Yeah,
and then Harvey winds up in the hospital. And I mean, that's a pretty good scene with them in the hospital where, Batman messes with his coin and he's like, okay, well, here you go. Now you have to do the right thing. And it was, that was just so cool.
I like that for sure. And then how in classic Batman fashion, we know that there's somebody out on the ledge. We don't know that Batman knows. And then Batman just bam, breaks the window, grabs the guy and pulls him in.
And it's a guy who's like all the scarred side of Two-Face, even wearing goggles, I assume, because he can't blink because he doesn't have eyelids. That was deep.
I didn't even think about that.
That was what the only reason I was thinking that they made that choice was like, well, if Two-Face's eyelids were burned off and this guy is made from the burned up half of Two-Face, he probably doesn't have eyelids there. But yeah, and then after that it's just they just kind of peace out and never referenced
and that's
again.
it for this story.
So
I mean, in no way do I not want that inclusion in here. It just to me makes it a little like I just keep saying bananas because it's just kind of wild to me.
Yeah,
it's just interesting. That's what you decided to do here, but okay, like because I mean he interacts with Joker and he interacts with Batman, so it's like it is a case of including another character that does make some kind of dent, no pun intended, on the overall story. So cool. Okay.
Intend your puns, you coward.
All right, pun intended. I actually thought of me like 3 seconds before I said it, but and then we got the big Dukaroo in Joker, who is classic. I mean, classic Marshall Rogers Joker here.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I love some of the lines that Englehart writes for him, because there are a couple points where I didn't necessarily groan, but I was like, okay, that's kind of a dated reference. Mm-hmm. Like there was something about
American Idol.
Yes, American Idol. And then the getting caught up in election tallies. We're not Florida. It's like, okay. But I mean, he has a couple of lines in there like I don't remember exactly what he was saying, but Joker said something like, if I wasn't so crazy, I'd be insane, or something like that. And I mean, it was just like, that's just a good, funny line that he has. But yeah, I mean, he looks a little bit beefier than Rogers drew him in Strange Apparitions. His face is wider and kind of more rectangular. But definitely has that kind of same look with the huge mouth. There's even it's on page let me see here, 68 of the trade, where he actually walks into like a guy's, or kicks in a guy's door. That's very reminiscent of his introduction in Strange Apparitions, even taking the hat off and everything. It's a nice callback there. But yes, the ending takes place in Joker's house, which is where I think you were going. So
yeah, so actually I kept looking for, so I did, because I'm totally with you in that there are Strange Apparitions Joker in this. I'm trying to find the one page, but the fun note, so the whole, you have a deadline or somebody will die. Mm-hmm. That's Laughing Fish, which is great. And it says Mr. Haney. I'm trying to see if they did say Bob Haney, in which that's a fun little
Yeah,
Not if they did say Bob Haney, because
there were a couple of those in there. I think there was an Infantino, or maybe there's a Carmine.
there's a Giordano.
Yeah, okay. I think there was a Carmine, and then there was a Giordano.
And Bruce sees Julius Schwartz at
Yes.
the event at the very
Yes.
beginning.
So there were some nice creator nods there.
Yeah, those are fun. But I think, oh man, I need to find this. I think it's when when Joker has Silver in the house, and he does go on a really long, like kind of like a monologue, and he does use part of the. I'm sorry, I'm taking up so much time. He does use part of there we go, part of like the dialogue bubbles.
Oh yeah, and leans against it. Yeah, I just came across that. Yeah,
yes,
like a fun little. Again, that's one of those kind of Bronze Age details that I loved. That it's like it's not taking itself too seriously. It's technically breaking the fourth wall, but it's not being like obnoxious about it.
Yeah,
it's just having fun with the medium.
Mm-hmm.
There was a couple of other points throughout like that.
Well, that made me think, because it was in Strange Apparitions, and I think it was at the end of the end of the Laughing Fit. No, in one of them, I think it does. Oh, there we go. Yep, it's in the Sign of the Joker issue as he's talking and like, haha, and it says, and he's even got his like arm through. I'm just going to show you, Jay, if you remember that one. So he's got his arm through the page and to turn it and peek in underneath it. So that's just what it made me think of right away. And that to me is like there's just something that's like a fun, charming bit about that. I love it.
Yeah, that Joker panel I was talking about where he keeps the guy's door in. It has like an arrow leading you to the next panel you're supposed to read. It's not in the trade, which is upsetting, but in the I don't remember which one I said I read. I think I said it was the Rogers one that I read, because Dark Detective is the last story in there, I think. Maybe it's the Englehart. I don't know. It's
the last one in the Rogers for sure.
Yeah, well, but the it also has a bunch of covers, so it may have been the Englehart one.
Okay.
Either way, at the end of like the first issue, it has this reveal of Two-Face, and then it says it has like a preview blurb that's like next issue, this guy, and it has a finger pointing up to Two-Face, like coming out of the caption box, which I know in the Marshall Rogers collection, one of the first stories in there has I think it's a story with like the calculator, and it has a couple of page transitions like that. That's like, what's going on here? Find out soon, but turn the page, and it has like an arrow leading you to the next page, or a finger pointing to the next page. So it's like one of those, kind of silly, kind of corny, very, very much of the like 70s, especially like Action Comics and Superman around that time would have a lot of stuff like that too, but just almost like the writer and sometimes even the editor was having fun with you, like talking to you while you're reading the story. So it's like, what's going on here, we'll find out later, but first let's get back to this story, whatever. So there's definitely some of those vibes going on in here, which again sadly isn't in the actual trade, because that's kind of what made it a lot more fun to read.
Does the trade include the cover of each to break up in the story?
No, it has the covers at the very end. Okay, it's a cover gallery.
That's something that does kind of bug me. I do like, and I think in all of these, like Legends of the Dark Knight, even with the Strange Apparitions, it doesn't throw the covers in to split them up. And those are even, and I get it sometimes if it is a case of like, oh, but the cover artist isn't the same as the interior artist. But when it's the same, I'm like, oh, I'd really like it if you put those in to help separate. But something I noticed, because like I said, I haven't looked at the trade that you have in your hands now. I haven't looked at that in a few years, but to notice between the two. But something I did notice is the story's called Dark Detective, but basically the beginning of each issue, like on the pages, it says The Dark Detective always. So I know, this was before Justin Timberlake said, drop the, but
it's cleaner.
Yeah. It's just kind of interesting to me. But so something I definitely want to talk about is a throwback to the art. Now, in that book, you'd think that I have stock in the 100 things every Batman fan should do and know, but there's just good information in it.
Yeah.
But it says of like an updated Zipatone, I think, is what it was called. Whereas then that's like an outdated, and now it's like screen tone, and it is like the opening to issue 5 when Batman's about to go take down Scarecrow, and the way that like the image is at night and stuff in the sky, that I think that's definitely what they're talking about. There is something that's kind of fun and cool, especially with the skies, of like the inking and the coloring feels very throwback to like the opening page of the Laughing Fish in Strange Apparitions. Like, it's the smallest thing, but I think that in reading these two back to back, it's like, oh, this is definitely like the evolution of coloring a little bit, of how it was done, how this stands out from, Neil Adams was huge in the 70s. This look definitely stands out as different than Neil Adams, and I think that's one of the traits of the Rogers and Austin team, is kind of, doing something this, like coloring this way. And I do like it. I do think that it works, and it doesn't show up all over the place in this story, but I do think that it's present quite a bit.
Yeah.
That's just a nerdy thing, because I'm a nerd. And then it does follow. I do love, and we'll bring this up here in a little bit, I love that image of Scarecrow chucking a pumpkin at Batman out on the farm, out of a barn at night. I just think that image is so freaking cool.
There's lots of cool Scarecrow stuff in here. Like I think it's the opening of page issue 4, where it's like Scarecrow huge. In the background, he's holding a knife, but the knife blade is the title of the issue, which is Thriller. So the blade is just, well, there's lots of cool stuff like that. Like just a few pages before that, there's a huge explosion, and the word boom is almost like radiating out of it to show like the force of the explosion and everything. So Rogers was just so creative with how he like incorporated titles, sound effects, a bunch of stuff like that into his work. Even subtle things like at the end when they're in the house and Batman can hear the ticking clock, and then you just see a tiny little tick sound effect, like in every panel. But that kind of ramps up the tension there, makes you as anxious as Batman is going through that house.
I do like, and I'm glad we're now at the house. I do love Joker has a fragile leg lamp in the house. That's delightful. But I do like also it makes total sense why he grabs Silver. This is right after Silver breaks the news to Evan, and then Joker grabs her and kidnaps her and says, basically a ransom note of Evan, you got to come and get her. And Silver does slip up a little bit in expecting somebody other than Evan to come and get her. And Joker's smart. And he's like, why? Why would it not be Evan? Why is this? So Batman's got some kind of connection to you. And then, do you remember the follow-up to Prey called Terror?
Yes.
Doug Mensch, Paul Gulacy, who also, both of them worked on Terror. And it was like a decade later in Legends of the Dark Knight. They worked on Prey. A decade later in Legends of the Dark Knight, they did Terror. That house is almost like it's a booby-trapped house. And I think I constantly get that and this mixed up because they're both old houses, both, booby-trapped. Both stories include Scarecrow. That it does take me a second, like, wait, which one's this Dark Detective? Which one? But it is a booby-trapped house that expertly booby-trapped by Joker. And I think it's fun. As weird as that is, I think it's fun. It's a great ending to the story of, it's the big climax and everything. And I think kind of everything in it works. I will grade for what is presented, not what it could have been. I don't need Evan's limbs chopped off.
Yeah, no.
Other than that, I do think that this is actually a good
it's a
finale.
great set piece. And again, I mean, very a lot of the rooms and death traps are, really creative. And then again, even with the illustrating and lettering, like when Batman opens a door and then falls through to like another floor, and then the lettering of his thought balloon is upside down because he fell upside down. It's just really creative and just really, really fun until it gets a little, gross at one point.
Until it's not fun.
But yeah, it's really clever too. I mean, I love when Batman actually has to think out of things. Like he's not just like, oh, well, the Joker would have known that, I would have known this room would have led to this. So I'm anticipating this, just coming into everything, automatically knowing how to solve every problem. I much prefer it when he actually has to use his wits and smarts to get out of it. He almost gets, cut up by some of those flying blades. And like I said, even falls through some trap doors and everything. But even when he comes across a room that he has a handle of, it's still really cleverly it's still really clever how he gets out of it, because it's not just like, oh, well, I knew this room would be here. It's just, well, if you said this guy fell through the floor, it's because it's a platform that spins around, so both sides of the floor are going to fall through if somebody's standing on it. So we both need to walk to opposite ends of the room so that neither of us fall through the floor. And that's how he and Evan get across that room, which is, just a really, really fun little scene there, which sadly Evan doesn't listen to Batman and just stay put. But that does lead us to the finale from there.
Listen to Batman.
Listen to Batman. He knows
always. He knows what he's doing.
I just noticed a fun little detail on again 124 in the trade. It's after Batman gets through that that pivoting floor room. He's walking through. There's like a one-way sign that has two arrows going either way. Below that, there's a panel where there's like a statue of like a Greek goddess, like Athena or something, and she has the gag glasses with nose and mustache on it. That's just funny, just a fun little detail.
And I mean, a Joker rat. We get a Joker rat.
Yes,
it's kind of fun.
Wish they would have done more with that.
Honestly, that could have been. Could you imagine? So, okay, well, living in Chicago, there are rats, and to see all of those suckers with Joker grins, terrifying, absolutely terrifying. So, on that same page, though, interesting, in maybe a little bit of almost like a throwback, is the cover to this issue, number 6, is like a redrawing of a scene within that issue. Which I thought was interesting. And I thought, so this is like that image, the cover also that represents it, definitely made me feel almost as if it was like an old was it Frank Franzetta maybe horror cover of like a one of the EC archives or EC comics covers, or
like an old horror cover.
An old horror cover is what that felt like to me. I wasn't like acting some kind of like pervy anything. It was just like, oh, this really does feel like horror, like a horror kind of movie.
And he's saying that because Silver is in some very saucy lingerie,
saucy stuff. Yeah.
And I figured out where the Two-Face and Scarecrow on the cover of the trade came from.
Okay.
It's the cover of issue 5. They just took Batman from that cover and took the Batman from that one panel I was talking about and swapped them out. Yeah, see here, I'll show you. See, that's the that's the cover right there. So but yeah, I mean, the cover is very, I won't necessarily say fun, because Joker is threatening to brand a defenseless woman with a J poker. So it's not necessarily fun, but yes, it has that old school kind of horror vibe to it.
I meant to ask. So then I do think it's a little abrupt in the ending, in the sense of Batman and just kind of being like, Evan needs you. And she's like, what? Don't sell me off to another man. And then it's kind of like Bruce gets him out and he's gone.
Yeah.
It's a pretty fast
Deuces.
wrap up. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Where's that panel? Deuces. It's quick. Not that I don't know, I'm not a writer. I just read this and then what do I think? That I don't know what they could have done instead of, or how they could have expanded it another page or two or something. But I think every time feel like, oh yeah, that does end really fast.
Yeah, it is. You go from this really, entertaining, a very elaborate final issue going through rooms of like a death trap house, and then it just all burns to the ground. And Bruce says, oh yeah, we love each other, but he needs you more, which I mean, in a sense, I can at least applaud Bruce for that. It's like, okay, I want you, he needs you. But again, that's kind of going back to how much agency is Silver actually having in this decision. If, Bruce is making it for her or telling her what needs to happen without having her input.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then it just ends. Again, plan to have a follow-up to it that we'll sadly never get. So, the fact that it is just kind of abrupt and this is what we have does make it a little bit of a letdown of an ending, just because there really isn't much of one.
Yeah. It's very rushed and sped through. Trying to think. I think I've hit on all the points that I really wanted to. Is there anything before I go into the usual questionnaire at the end? Is there anything you want to touch on that we didn't?
Let me just do a quick flip through here. I mean, like I said, some of the humor was pretty spot on. Like even how the Joker escapes at the beginning. The elevator car is just flying upward, and then you see like a loud smush, and then ketchup just seeps through and everything. I do think Batman was a little cavalier with that. It's like, okay, you kind of let him maybe die, but I guess it's okay, the Joker is going to escape if he wants to, kind of thing. But no, I don't really have much else to say about it, because I mean, again, it's a good story. It's a quicker read than Strange Apparitions. It's not as fulfilling of a read, just because I mean, like I said, this is pretty much one pretty clear A plot with a couple of B and C plots. Strange Apparitions was a bunch of little A plots, one per issue, with a B plot that kind of drove everything in the background. But no, I mean, like I said, I wasn't necessarily dreading it, but I was thinking this was kind of okay, something that we just kind of have to do, since we did one, want to do another, kind of have to do this one, just because it's like, not on the same page. It's like, okay, I watched, Batman Begins, I watched The Dark Knight. I guess I'll watch The Dark Knight Rises too, just to kind of finish everything. But this is the middle chapter instead.
Don't you slander Dark Knight Rises, Ryan Hostel. He will hunt you down in Texas.
I like the movie, but I can watch Batman Begins or The Dark Knight by themselves. I usually only watch The Dark Knight Rises after I've watched the other two.
Okay, gotcha. Fair enough.
But no, I mean, it's good. I enjoyed. I like the fact that I almost forced myself to reread it in picking it, because I reminded myself that this is a solid, worthwhile,
solid read. Yep.
Yes,
I agree. Let's hop into some favorites. Jay, what was your favorite part of Dark Detective?
Part or panel?
Part first.
All right. I mean, I really like the death trap house at the end. That's just something we need more of, just a bunch of goofy, silly death traps. That was really good. I like the imagery in the like the scarecrow vision Bruce gets. Some of it gets a little convoluted, like, okay, is this actually supposed to be Bruce, or is this supposed to be like Scarecrow just putting stuff in his head and making him imagine I don't know. But the imagery was really cool just because it was very surreal. Rogers is fantastic at just that kind of bizarre imagery that makes you think this. I mean, there's just something not quite right here, and giving it that kind of sense of dread and unevenness, I guess, because it is in his head and not actually happening. So I like those two scenes quite a bit.
Gotcha. I'll go with your first one, the Death Trap House. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Every time that I read this, even though it is kind of spaced out, I know I end up tricking myself into trying to figure out, wait, which Death Trap House is this, from Terror or Dark Detective? But I do know that it's my favorite part. that there's no question to. How about a favorite panel?
So my favorite panel in the whole thing is on page 90 in the trade. So doing math, let's say this is probably in issue 4. It's after Silver tells Evan about her and Bruce, and when she's breaking up with him. Very top right panel. It's very thin, long rectangle, close-up shot of Evan's, like half of Evan's face. And just before that, Silver says, Bruce and I will stay out of the limelight. We'll stay in the shadows. No one will know. And then Evan just says, I'll know. Just the like that one little line there, and the darker, like melancholy blue shading of his face adds so much character to someone that we've said, is kind of a, one note character that you just kind of feel bad for. It actually gives him some dimension there, because in like another writer's hands, he could have gone off and started arguing, could have started, pleading for her love. But, instead, he is clearly just heartbroken right there. And as much as there's, some awesome Batman content, some, great shots of the villains, I think that's a testament to Marshall Rogers' visual storytelling ability, that he can take a secondary character created for this book that was pretty much there just to serve as a catalyst for the stories of other recognized characters, and yet he can still make such a powerful moment like that out of one bit of dialogue from Englehart, and then just very limited color and just a close-up framing of his face, that he can draw so much character out of that one panel and make you feel for this guy when we know next to nothing about him. Wow. So that's that. I mean, when I got to this while I was reading it the other day, I was like, I think that's my favorite panel in the whole story. That's just because it
unexpected.
And it kind of, but it kind of elevates it too, because you'd think it would be, Batman roughing up some guys in a bar, or maybe showing your hand here, but Scarecrow throwing a pumpkin bomb at
maybe
Batman.
You never know.
Awesome images, but just great storytelling like that is what makes me love comics. So the fact that I picked that out of a superhero story shows just how great of a creative team Englehart and Rogers and Austin were.
No. Yeah, totally unexpected. I'm torn.
You rethink your life there?
Well, yeah, a little bit. Yeah, my place in the universe.
I'm thinking and feeling things right now.
Oh no! How many times in my life that I was Evan Gregory? I'll know. Yeah. Yeah. You kind of showed my hand, but also I'm very indecisive. I'm stuck because I do love that Scarecrow chucking a pumpkin bomb at Batman in that setting. I love that panel. I also really like the panel that inspired the cover for issue 6 of Batman coming in at the right time to save Silver, because it does remind me of old horror painting cover magazines, something like that. So Damn. I would almost, it's like I like both stand out for different reasons too. One is like badass action. The other one is like genuine horror. And like, gotta save Batman. I need a coin. I need to flip a coin. Just, you know what? I'm going to say the Joker Batman Silver. Then when I publish this episode, I might like post that I've changed my mind. I don't know. Back and forth on them. I don't know.
That could be your poll for this one.
There's my poll.
Which is Ryan's favorite image?
Which is my favorite, yes.
From this story.
Now, how about, would you like to see Dark Detective as an animated adaptation?
Not directly, I don't think. Well,
Okay.
I mean, just because it's so tied into Strange Apparitions, which has already had so much adapted into other
Animation.
mediums.
Animated series.
Exactly. But I mean, there are definitely elements that I would like to see. I mean, I'm sure I said it then. Seeing Silver St. Cloud in something would be great. Besides, you know, Batman Soul of the Dragon, which was awesome, but she's in it for like 2 minutes at the beginning.
Exactly.
I mean, the idea of the Joker running for office, you know, is amazing and hilarious. So there's, I mean, lots of stuff that you can mine from that. Even you know, things like of course, the Death Trap house, you know, need that. And I mean, honestly, it's since we're in that age of continuations of unfinished stories, it would be interesting to see a follow-up with, or at least have somebody do a take on the Two-Face twin clones and kind of incorporate that into some sort of story too, just to see what you can do with that kind of thing. So even though I wouldn't like a shot-for-shot remake of Dark Detective, I would definitely like to see a lot of elements from it in some sort of animated property for sure.
Yeah. I'm kind of with you because it does, I mean, it's a follow-up to Strange Apparitions, but we saw elements of Strange Apparitions in the animated series. So it's like, do we just need a retread? But that Joker house would be awesome to see animated. The Scarecrow bit would be awesome to see animated. Two-Face, I don't need it. Take it or leave it. Like, sure. I don't know. But a big through line is the Bruce Silver relationship, and what makes it work is the fact that it's like reunited again, as opposed to, you can't just take this movie and be like, well, let's act like, you know, this, like it's, and change that a little bit. I don't know how well that would work. So I'm also a little bit of like, sure, why not? See what direction the Caped Crusader cartoon goes. Maybe they'll bring Silver in there. I mean, why not? Come on.
It would make sense.
It would. That'd be great. I'd really like that. But okay. So, Jay, what are your final thoughts on Dark Detective as we start to inch toward the finish line?
I mean, it's a good story. It's a good follow-up. It's a worthy follow-up to an amazing story.
Yes.
It's I mean, it's got some really clever writing, a pretty strong plot that does not necessarily fizzles out, but remains unfinished, I'd say. But still, it's a quick read. It's an easy read. Has some great, just some great artwork to it. It's a good Bronze Age Batman comic told in the relatively modern day. One that kind of surprised me on a revisit and made me appreciate it more than I did on the first time. So definitely read Strange Apparitions and then read Batman Dark Detective, and you'll have yourself a nice full meal of Batman content there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to follow greatness with greatness, but that's also okay, because I can understand in comparison terms. Yes, it's like, oh, Strange Apparitions is great, and this isn't as good as that, but it's still a good Batman story. It's still fun to revisit. I do look forward. It's not an obligation to me to revisit this story, but I do enjoy revisiting it. It's spaced out between each reread, so I don't remember all of the specifics, but I don't know, it does become a little bit of a brisk of a read, and it's fun. There's funny elements to it. There's good, just like classic comic booky elements to it, and then we also like, I don't know, I'm a sucker for Joker and Scarecrow stories, so and it always usually gets me to read Strange Apparitions again, so that's always a plus. Good story. Jay, you know what? This is where I would thank you for coming on, but I'm going to delay that because I've said on here that if anybody wants to send in a question to the show, feel free. You know what? Somebody did.
All right.
So I'd like to ask a question.
Yes, you've got a question?
This is Dominic Iannica. I have to read this part because it makes me go, well, dear master of the Batman library, I have a question hoping you have an answer. What would be the next Batman comic you would adapt to an animated film? Thanks for this incredible podcast. I can't tell you how many comics I have bought since you started up. Cheers, Dominic. Thank you, Dominic, for writing in. I do appreciate that. And I'm very good at spending money, and I'm very good at helping people spend money. So I'm really glad that you have bought a lot of comics and it's my fault. But because, I mean, this stuck out, and I know we're starting to go a little long, but we just talked about it adapted in animation. I'm like, yeah, this is a great question. So Jay, not one, you can only choose one. And I'm not saying like once, it could be one issue, one arc, one whole story, whatever. But now like this could be adapted, or this, like, what would be the next Batman comic that you would adapt to an animated film?
Batman Dark Detective.
Wow.
Yeah,
What?
just kidding. Oh man, that's a good question.
It is hard for me to just choose one.
Yeah,
as
there
well.
are things that's like, okay, it's Nightfall is overdue. But then if you do Nightfall, you got to do Night Quest, Night's End, Prodigal, lead that into Cataclysm and, No Man's Land and all that. So you just kind of snowball from there. I'm trying to think just one really tight Batman animated or Batman story that should be adapted into animation. Just a good, solid standalone movie. That is an excellent question.
I've got it. Now, people would think that my easy answer would be Dark Victory. Of course, I would love it. That sounds cool. Prey, I would almost say, but I think people, they feel like they've gotten a lot of early Batman lately. Mm-hmm. Batman in his prime, Darker Than Death, The Legends of the Dark Knight, number 207 through 211, is a story that nobody ever talks about. And I bring it up a lot. It is a good murder mystery Batman story. Batman in his prime, doing Batman things. It doesn't involve the A-list villains or anything, but it's a damn good murder mystery. And that is, as you just said, self-contained. That story you could put in Batman year 3, Batman year 9, Batman year 14. Like it's just a standalone story that's great. And I think that's something, and visually it's very appealing. So that's my pick. And that's kind of a weird, deep one, but that story is on DC Universe Infinite. And I just keep telling people, Legends of the Dark Knight, number 207 to 211.
I mean, sometimes you got to pick those, deep cuts that no one talks about because, that's nobody has expectations for it in a good way.
Yeah.
They're not going to think, oh, this is how I want this story to be. Mm-hmm. So adapting something like that, that's definitely a great way to go. I thought I had something on the tip of my tongue, but I forgot because man, there are a lot of like shorts that I think would be awesome.
Yeah.
Like the Joker's 5-Way Revenge. That would be awesome as a 30-minute short. Or even like Batman, I want to say it's 465. That's Tim Drake's first night on the town as Robin. Something like that would just be really cool to have. But I'm looking on my shelves back here, see if anything kind of sticks out.
You can say Dark Victory.
You know what? I think it would be really, really cool to have an animated movie based on, and as much as they can do it in the style of Lil Gotham.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Because, I mean, that series was just fantastic.
Amazing.
It was fantastic. But that would be a Batman movie for every holiday.
Yeah.
So it's your Batman Christmas movie, it's your Batman Halloween movie, it's your Batman Thanksgiving movie, it's your Batman Valentine's Day movie.
I watched Batman Lil Gotham 12 times this year. Because if it's every holiday.
That would be really, really cool if they did something like that. And it would be, amazing all ages Batman content. Yeah. So I'm gonna go with an adaptation of Lil Gotham.
I love that answer. That's great. Yeah, I would love that. And I, much like I tell anybody that will listen to read Darker Than Death, I also I go to whoever I can and say, please look at Lil Gotham. I think it's also on Infinite.
Oh, I'm sure it is, because I'm pretty sure, wasn't it like a digital first?
Read.
So
yeah,
surely it's up there. But yeah,
such easy reads too. They're a breeze.
And I mean, Dustin Nguyen's like painted, like
Painted
watercolor
art.
work. I'm
so
trying to
good.
think. It's like, did you ever see The Snowman? Like, it's an animated, I think it's a short. I think it's like 30-40 minutes long. I think it's based off a book. But it has it's about a snowman and a little boy. I think it's almost completely silent. And the animation style is very much in my head what I could imagine something like Lil Gotham. They could use it to kind of capture that watercolor feel, because it's almost like jerky animation in a good way, in that it's not super duper clean, but it gives it its own like character and everything. So I think something like that could work.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great answer.
And that was a good question.
I think we had two great answers.
We did.
If I may brag about
agree.
us. So.
I agree.
So yeah, Dominic, thank you for sending in the question.
Yes.
If anybody else wants to send in a question, maybe do like one a show, not get too crazy or something, feel free to do that at thebatmanbc@gmail.com. So now I will say, Yaws, thank you for coming back to the show. As expected, this is a delightful conversation. I had a swell time. I hope you did as well.
I also had a swell time.
Very swell. Why don't you go ahead and frolic? Yes, we love to frolic. Pete questioned last episode, what is frolic? Are we really frolicking? I'm like, yeah, what are you doing with your time? Like, we're all frolicking and over this nerd stuff. But why don't you go ahead and plug away, sir? Whatever you'd like.
I'm on Twitter, fairly regularly. Mostly I just jump to the top of my feed and scroll back a little bit, see if anything interesting happened. But I'm always there to interact. If you like, at me, as the kids say, at JAYAWS. I have my own blog, Comic Pause, which is at Comic Pause, like pause a video game, PAUSE, that I've actually started a fun little series that I call Random Robin, that I have been going through and picking a random issue of the Tim Drake Robin series, or the notable appearances of Tim Drake long box that I have. That's pretty much good Tim stories that aren't his solo titles. And I've just been reading a random issue from that, and then just writing up, like a little quick review on it, saying if it's my first time to read it, giving some fun facts. Since I'm going through the floppies, I'll talk about like the ads that are in there, because those are a blast to look at, and see stuff from like 1997 that totally forgot used to saturate media back then, but then it all just kind of comes flooding back in, like honeycombs
Yes.
commercials and BMX biking and Mountain Dew, which is still with us. Yes.
Will never go away.
But I'll do just talk about the ads in there, the letters, the letter columns, if there is one, and fun questions people ask. I'm just having a blast with it because I completed my Robin collection last year and have been amassing more notable Tim appearances. And frankly, any comic that has Tim Drake that's out there right now is pretty bad. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to do something that that still would bring me joy with my favorite character and put use to the comics that I have there. So I've been doing that pretty regularly for the past few weeks, and I have until like the end of the year scheduled with with those. But
Score.
Yeah, not on any other shows on a regular basis, but pop up here and there. I was on the Comic Binge, their YouTube stream a couple weeks ago, and yeah, I'll show up where anyone will have me.
All right, there you go. Follow that man. Batman Book Club, you can follow on Twitter and Instagram at the Batman BC. Also subscribe to the Batman Book Club YouTube channel if you would ever be so kind. I already told you can write in the batmanbc@gmail.com. And if you want to support the show, there's a variety of ways you can do it. Like I said at the top, patreon.com/the Batman BC, tpublic.com, type in TBBC, and you can buy some merchandise with the Batman Book Club sprinkled all over it. But if you want to support the show and you don't want to spend any money at all, it's 100% A-OK. The best, easiest, and most impactful thing you can do to help out this show is to spread the word and rate and review it wherever you listen to podcasts. So Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google Play, iHeartRadio, wherever, just rate and review the show, because the more reviews the show gets, the more it helps spread the word. And as we all know, the word is panic. So for Yaws, I am Ryan Lauer. And until next time, read more Batman comics.